We are just 1 week out from the 2024 NFL Draft. We've gone over quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs. There's one position left we have to talk about, Chris.
Yeah, and that's the emerging position in the NFL right now, and that's the tight end. Let's get into it.
And welcome back to the Standard Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jono.
And I'm your host, Chris. And we are back together again after a couple weeks apart. A lot of travel been happening. But we are here to talk about the last position that we are going to talk about in the pre-draft rankings, and that's going to be the tight end.
This is, I would say, I'd be more excited to say it was my favorite position to talk about because I love the tight end position, especially in fantasy. That's the place where when you do your research and when you really study up and you listen to our advice and you listen to some other advice out there, you're going to get a jump on the rest of your league in when to take quality picks in your fantasy football drafts at the tight end position, because everybody's going for Travis Kelce. Everybody's going for Mark Andrews. And listen, they fall to you. That's great in terms of value. But there are people who went out and they did not go for those big names, and they had fantastic runs to their fantasy championships. And there's a couple names in here that may be ones to keep an eye on and take a look at besides the obvious. But why don't we talk about the first big player here?
Well, let me take a step back and talk about the tight end position as a whole really quick. And that's the emerging position in the NFL where you're seeing younger and younger stars really come up. This is a position where as rookies, these guys step in and make immediate impacts. Look at the guys from last year alone, the Sam Laportas, the Trey McBrides. You know, these guys stepped in and made huge impacts right away as rookies. And we're seeing this every year where there's 2-3 guys that are making fantasy impacts at this position, where 5 years ago, it was Travis Kelce. I mean, even last year, we talked about it. It was Travis Kelce, a whole lot of mediocrity, and then everyone else. And now we're starting to see all that condense. And the top 10 is really talented now. So you no longer need to go and draft the Kelces and the Mark Andrews of the world. Now you can go and get the TJ Hawkinsons, the Sam Laportas, the Trey McBrides. Evan Ingram at times is really effective. David Njoku. And you're going to see a couple guys on this list that can come in right now that are going to make immediate impacts on their team. Like, we didn't even mention George Kittle. I mean, he's probably the best overall tight end in the league. But there's a guy on this list, and it's the first guy that we're going to talk about who has a lot of similar comps to George Kittle.
Well, listen, I think Mark Andrews, to me, he doesn't get that hip drop injury that he had last year. He would have been the number one tight end overall. Just the trajectory he had, the usage he has on that team, I think that changes a little bit depending upon how the receiver usage happens in Baltimore and with this running game maybe enhancing. But I will tell you what, he's still going to be the favorite target for Lamar Jackson. Again, he falls to you in the third round for Mark Andrews, falls to you early fourth round in one of these leagues because people are afraid to touch him and people want to just wait and try and get a later tight end. Take the value, first and foremost. But there are players out there, like you said, people who took a chance on Sam Laporta, even though last year you took a chance on him, you really did as a backup tight end because he wasn't the starter and became one. But you had other ones like Dalton Kincaid people took a chance on. He had some highlight weeks that gave you some big wins. There's players out there, and you can make moves. But let's talk about this list here because there's a guy at the top of this list who is the unanimous number one tight end coming out of this league.
Could be a top 10 pick.
Arguably, you could argue, I mean, Georgia here, that he is the best tight end to come out of in the NFL draft in quite some time because even Gronk wasn't rated this high in the NFL draft. Now, that being said, it was a different position back when Gronk was drafted.
I mean, you could argue it's not an argument. Like, he is a top 5 offensive player in this draft.
Yes.
And that's including wide receiver, outside of quarterback. That's including wide receiver and running back. He is a top 5 offensive player. You know, I could even argue that even with quarterback, he's a top 5 offensive player.
I could argue he should be because I think quarterbacks are being risen to the top because teams need the quarterback.
Right.
But that being said, I think he is. And he's, this past year he had a shortened season due to some injuries here and there. He played through some injuries in games he probably shouldn't have, which only led to 56 receptions, still 714 yards and 6 touchdowns in 10 total games, including that Alabama game where he was used sparingly.
Yeah.
But he's a 2-time John Mackey Award winner for the best tight end in the country out of 3 years playing in college football. And he led the team, led UGA in receiving for all 3 of his years. And we have names like Ladd McConkey. We have names like Adonai Mitchell. We have guys who were Georgia receivers during his tenure there that he surpassed in the receiving game. It just shows the dynamic ability of Brock Bowers. It shows his ability to be on the field almost all the time for blocking ability. It is a lot like Travis Kelce with the explosiveness of George Kittle. And George Kittle, I think, I actually agree with you, is probably the best overall rounded tight end out there in terms of blocking, in terms of intensity, his explosiveness, and his athletic ability. This is a step up from a George Kittle with what he brings to this field, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a better route runner, and I think after the catch, he's very good. George Kittle's also very good after the catch.
Yes,
I think George Kittle as a blocker, though, is significantly better, which also plays to the fact that it keeps George Kittle on the field 100% of the time. Where I think Brock Bowers is going to lack in the game is at the blocking ability. And me and you talked about 2 months ago?
Yeah, a little while ago.
I really didn't think that. I thought he was being overrated. I thought he was being too hyped up, and I thought he was not going to be equal to the caliber. And the more and more I watched his tape, the more and more I realized how good of a player he is with the ball in his hands. And you're seeing, you go and watch his tape at Georgia. He's taking screens. He's taking swing passes. He's not only catching stuff downfield, and yeah, he's really good at that too and getting himself open.
Yeah.
But they want to get the ball in his hands, and if he goes to the right team, he's going to be an immediate playmaker. Now, there are teams that I don't think utilize the tight end very well at the NFL level. If he ends up on one of those teams, I don't know how much of an impact player he's going to be. But if he ends up on a team that does utilize the tight end with a quarterback that can get on the ball, he's going to be a real difference maker in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you in terms of teams he's going to go to. I also think the natural change in the way the NFL is, and these offensive coordinators are seeing that having a tight end with pass catching and athletic ability, your Njokus, your Kittles, these guys have the ability to make plays and create mismatches that your wide receivers sometimes can't do because they get taken out of the game with the caliber of cornerbacks at the NFL level that there are now. So I think this is a situation where, we've seen him go to the Jets at 10, the Falcons at 8, and all these mock drafts, two teams that have quarterbacks that love their tight end.
Yeah.
That he would thrive in. And I think whatever team he goes to, it's going to be a game changer for that team. He's going to be an immediate number 2 pass catcher for that team. Hopefully not a number 1, because that means he's going to a place that is in dire need of pass catchers, and I don't think that's the right place for him to go.
Right, I've seen him go to Carolina, and do you really love him there?
I don't love that, though.
Right, so yeah, if you go,
unless they make another move, like go grab T. Higgins or something like that to give yourself a wide receiver 1, because Deontay Johnson plus him, I think he takes the wide receiver 1 role or the tight end 1.
Yeah, he's going to take the tight end 1 role, I think, wherever he goes. There are very few teams out there where he goes into, if the Lions drafted him, I don't think he's going to be a tight end 1 there.
Well, yeah, a team's not going to waste a first-round draft pick. And it's not that it's a waste, but, a team that has a solid tight end already is not going to take a Brock Bowers.
Maybe you put another dynamic playmaker there that's, a big with Laporta, he was running routes out there, and you saw how much he was open. I don't think it's a good fit in Detroit, but, yeah, he's going to go, and you look at teams around the 8th to the 12th pick is probably where he's going to end up going. And I just think that
he shouldn't fall farther than that, in my opinion.
He shouldn't, but it depends on what the teams need. It depends on what they value. I don't see him going there. But if he does go to the place that I think everyone has seen him go the most is the Jets.
Yeah.
At 10. And if he does go to the Jets, I think that's a really good fit for him. As a Jets fan myself, I would love to see that. I would also like them to see them draft an offensive lineman. But getting a tight end there that can be a dynamic playmaker, that can be on the field for a blocking tight end as well, I think that's a big step up for Aaron Rodgers. It gives another pass catching and offensive weapon for them.
Absolutely.
And it'd be a perfect fit for a quarterback that loves to use athletic tight ends. And so that's a really good fit for him. And you're going to see some of these guys that we'll mention on the rest of this list that, they're really going to be dependent on the situation that they go to. And I think that even Brock Bowers can fall victim to that, depending on what situation he goes to. Even if he goes to Atlanta, do we really love him in Atlanta?
I do. Absolutely.
Kyle Pitts on one side.
Get Kyle Pitts is there.
Drake London. I don't know if there's room for another guy there. Do we love him if he goes to Denver? Do we love him if he goes to the Vegas? these are the things where you're like, all right, well, maybe he's not going to be the most explosive player. Like I thought Michael Mayer was really going to do a better job because Jimmy Garoppolo loved him. Jimmy Garoppolo loses a job, or Jimmy Garoppolo loves the tight end. He loses his job there. And when Mayer starts to really develop in the second half of the season, they have Aiden O'Connell there.
Yeah. Well, I think that was kind of a lost cause of a season for the Raiders to begin with. Everybody, I mean, it was not great for Jimmy G. It wasn't great for Josh Jacobs. Mayer really didn't get to develop with a QB1. And that's the same thing as if Bowers goes to a place that doesn't have a true QB1 yet. I love him at the Jets. Well,
I don't see him going to Chicago. I don't see him going to the Giants. I don't see him going to the Chargers. I don't see him going to the Cardinals.
No, the only way he goes to the Giants is if the Giants trade down and they miss out on those top wide receivers and he happens to still be there. Which, again, you don't see it happening. You don't see it happening for the Cardinals either unless they trade down with somebody. And, again, those big wide receivers are gone and they don't want to go with an O-lineman or a defensive player there. To me, there's very few teams that it fits the mold in a win now that Bowers becomes an elite playmaker for this team. And I think the Jets is the number one team, and you talked about it. I think if he were to somehow fall to 18 to the Bengals, or the Bengals traded up because he went past the Jets, that to me is a fantastic place for him to land.
Yeah, I think so.
And to me, I think with the Jets and Aaron Rodgers or Joe Burrow and the Bengals, you have an established premier quarterback that can help develop his game, especially someone like Aaron Rodgers who really knows how to utilize the tight end and can teach him the little nuances on ways to get open better, ways to sell a fake, ways to chip and go, stuff that like Brock Bowers didn't do a ton of at Georgia because he didn't need to. He was open all the time. He was running routes. I mean, he's used all over the field. To go to a team like that can use him all over the field makes those quarterbacks even more dangerous.
Yeah.
So,
it's not going to happen, but Kansas City, he fits the mold of the Travis Kelce there, kind of. So, but he's not going to fall all the way down to 32nd pick. And any of those teams that are down below that are playoff teams, I don't know if he fits all those teams, but they're not going to have a chance to get him.
No.
So he's going to end up on a team where they don't even utilize the tight end as much, or they're not in a position where they're really going to be able to utilize him and use him to his full ability. Not yet with the quarterbacks that they have. I think that, again, if he ends up in the right situation, he can be having Sam Laporta numbers, or think George Kittle his rookie year.
Yeah.
I think that's more realistic is George Kittle's rookie year, and year 2, year 3 is really where he really starts to break out. But I would say that's a good expectation for him.
But to me, he's the perfect pick in a fantasy draft if you want to fade the top guys and take a chance on a guy, because the chances are more in your favor than they are in failing, especially when we see where he goes here when we break down our draft in a couple weeks. But I do think the Bears could be very interesting. They don't need him because they have Kmet, but what I'm saying is you have a new regime. We have a new quarterback coming in. If they can't get one of those top receivers to pair with the other receivers there, Kmet is a good tight end.
Well,
but is Kmet a premier tight end?
It doesn't make sense for the Bears to do that.
It doesn't, but again, crazier if things have happened in drafts.
For sure, but you already have Kmet, and you already have Allen, you already have DJ Moore.
Allen's a 1 year.
It doesn't matter.
It does matter because we're thinking about the future here.
If he's a 1 year deal and they're trying to win now with a rookie quarterback that comes in that they're going to clearly draft at number 1, do they use their second pick and draft a tight end there, or do they give him some kind of offensive line support?
Again, do you take a quote-unquote possible generational talent in a tight end position like Brock Bowers if you want to give your guy a weapon for the future?
Yeah.
Because you have DJ Moore. You have Keenan Allen there, which is going to be a great tool for a first-year quarterback. We already saw that with Herbert, how good it was. And now you give him a premier tight end to grow with. To me, if I'm looking to load up on the offense right now and not expecting as a Chicago Bears team, maybe they make a push for the playoffs as a wild card spot, but we know where they are. Maybe they're not fully ready, but they go get Keenan Allen because they know that guy can help develop their quarterback. I don't know. I'd do it because if you don't have a chance for those receivers at the 9 spot, why not go take a guy who's going to be as good, if not more valuable than the wide receiver position for you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, I think he's really talented, but the if you're thinking of it as an NFL GM, you're building around a young quarterback, and you're not going to draft a top 10 tight end, even if he's a generational player. You're just not going to do it.
No,
not when you have clear holes at the offensive line and on the defensive side of the football, and you don't have holes at the tight end or wide receiver position.
Well,
they've
made moves on the defensive side.
Yeah,
offensive line, can actually use a little bit of help too. So I get it, but is the offensive lineman that's going to be there at 9 going to be worth the value?
What I'll say is I actually think that Atlanta is a good spot for him, and I could see Atlanta drafting a wide receiver in their position and trading back up if Bowers falls, but by moving Kyle Pitts and another pick.
Yeah, that's what I say. Trade Kyle Pitts plus a pick and move up. To me, I think
keep Kyle Pitts and just trade picks and move back in. And I think it's a good fit for him. But I think I said it earlier earlier when we were talking, I don't think it's a great fit for him with Kyle Pitts and Drake London there. I think they'd be better suited to get a wide receiver.
Correct. I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
That's enough of Brock Bowers. We know he's. I'm excited to see where he goes.
He's good, guys.
He's very
good.
Everybody talked about Dalton Kincaid last year and the hype it had around him. The hype's real for Bowers. That's the difference. Kincaid's hype was a little fluffed. He was good in college, but in what he brought to the NFL level needed some development. Brock Bowers is a guy who can hit the ground running.
Yeah, for sure.
And then it's not an Iowa tight end.
No, and not an Iowa tight end.
Well, let's talk about this other guy here, too, because to me, this pass-catching specialist out of Texas, Jatavion Sanders, to me is the number 2 tight end prospect coming out here for teams who you're going to be able to get in the second round, if not early third round, depending upon how these go. 6'4", 243. He had 45 receptions for 682 yards, only 2 touchdowns. I don't harp on the touchdowns for tight ends in college. Even, it is what it is, but he can be a mismatch with the linebackers. He specializes in the seam routes on the field. So good luck trying to keep up with a 6'4", 243 speedster that has good hands. I think this is another guy who can create that mismatch that a team that may not be able to get Brock Bowers in that first round can take a chance in the middle to late round in the second round to go get him as an opportunity.
Yeah.
Now, Buffalo doesn't need it. Baltimore doesn't need it. Kansas City really doesn't need it unless they see this guy as one of their futures after Travis Kelce. But there's teams out there that can use it.
Yeah, I think Bowers is the only person that has a first-round grade and possibly even the only guy that has a first or second round grade.
Yeah, I agree.
Everyone else, I think, is going to be either a third round or later pick. And that's just the nature of the tight end position because there's so many other pieces that people need to hold, and it is a luxury. And the truth is that there are a lot of really good tight ends in the league right now, and there are a lot of good pass catching tight ends in the league right now, and there are still a lot of teams that are more power run the football and want more blocking tight ends that can do it all.
Correct.
And this is where I actually think that Sanders, as good as a pass catcher as he is, he's almost the opposite as a blocker from a tight end.
Well, you know what he reminds me of a little bit?
He's tight-hipped. He doesn't center up very well. He's not going to be he drifts in his blocking schemes.
Correct.
And his seam run, and I'll say this even as a pass catcher, he's a good pass catcher. He's not a very good route runner, especially against zones. He drifts a lot in those zones. He's a good seam route, and he's a mismatch there. But when he has to sit down in a zone, he hasn't learned that yet. And that's something that usually takes a year or two for these tight ends to figure out, these younger tight ends. But when they do figure it out, if they have everything else, they become very, very, very good and very valuable.
Well, he reminds me of David Njoku. Njoku is a pass-catching specialist in the NFL. Do I think he's a premier blocker in the NFL? I wouldn't call him a premier blocker. There's a reason why Harrison Bryant was with the Browns, and out there at times too. But the guy creates a mismatch with linebackers, creates mismatch even against some nickel corners because of size alone. This guy's 6'4", 243. You're not going to find a cornerback that's going to be that same build against there. And Njoku specializes in that seam route.
Yeah.
And he beats people deep a lot. And he does struggle with the zone sometimes. Njoku does drift a lot. He doesn't come back to the quarterback. He doesn't sit, when he should. And that's why he has a lot of drop balls too. Yep. So this is what he reminds me of. The biggest difference is there's a lot more hype in Njoku coming into the NFL draft than Sanders.
Well, we knew that Njoku was a raw player when he came into the NFL, but
his athletic
freak,
prowess was freak.
But you actually saw the big step forward that he had this year is he actually learned to sit down in the zones a lot more, and and look at the season that he had because of it. He always had the talent, but for the last couple of years, he just wasn't that polished of for lack of better terms, he didn't have high IQ with route running. And I think that is an elite skill that few tight ends come into the league with. And it usually takes them a couple of years to develop that. But if, like I said, if they have the other intangibles, if they are good pass catchers, if they have the speed and the quickness, like Sanders has extremely quick feet for a big guy. And so he can get in and out of routes, in and out of breaks. And once he learns to sit down in those breaks, he can be a real talent. Like I can see him possibly going and learning under Kels and possibly going into Cincinnati and slowly developing into one of these elite pass catching tight ends that can do more. But I think he's going to, with pretty much everyone other than Bowers on this list, I think there are going to be guys that struggle at times to see the field because they're so raw in terms of what the NFL wants them to do. Because in college, let's be honest, right? These guys are freaks for a reason. You know, they're
playing for these big programs, or half the games they play, they're just beating up on your little brother.
Yeah,
so.
and they're always going to have mismatches. And, you know, the truth of the matter is there are linebackers that can run with you in the NFL.
Yeah, that's true.
There are some linemen that can run with you in the NFL.
Yeah.
And so are you going to learn how to scheme a defense, how to read a defense, and learn to sit down in a zone, sit down and come back to your quarterback? Sanders does have the other intangible that he has. He's a very physical runner after the catch. So he takes a lot of these short passes and will turn them into first down. So he's going to be a guy that they're going to scheme to get the ball into his hands. And I think if he gets onto the right team, he can be an impact player. I don't see it as much. Like I see him being more of a bye-week replacement in fantasy. Or a second half of the season guy like Dalton Kincaid was, but Dalton Kincaid had value in the second half of the season. When Dawson Knox gets hurt,
injury,
all of a sudden he has to step up, and he's getting 10 targets a game. So that's something that's very within the realm of possibility for Sanders.
You know a place I think I could see him going that he can learn behind a tight end. There's two places where I could see him going where I think he can thrive. One, it's a little bit later in the season. One, he would have more of an immediate impact. But one is the New England Patriots.
Okay.
Hunter Henry there already, a great tight end overall. Like good route runner, understands the offense, knows how to block. He can learn really well from him. But this adds a dynamic. I mean, let's be honest, they just don't have receivers there.
Yeah.
And this adds a dynamic, gives them a pass catcher where they can run two tight end sets. I mean, they tried to do it with Gesicki, but I don't think Gesicki is really a pass catching specialist. I think he just is a better pass catcher than a blocker and just happened to be that. He's a good tight end. But the other one is the Chargers.
Yeah.
I think the Chargers, if they get him in the third round, or this guy falls to the fourth round possibly, this is a guy who can go to it. I mean, we saw Everett pass catching specialist. That's what that guy was for the Chargers, and he thrived in those offenses. Herbert likes his tight ends. He loves the running backs. He found ways to get them the ball. And I know it's a whole new regime over there, but it gives them somebody else that's got size as a pass catcher.
I'll give you two other teams where I think he's a really good fit, and that I think later in the season he can really step into a role or develop under a really good tight end. So the develop under a good tight end, I think Pittsburgh is a really good spot for him to go.
Don't forget
with Freiermuth.
Yeah, Freiermuth, but they also have Washington out of Georgia, who's a second year.
Sure, but I mean he's a big body.
Yes,
he's not an elite pass catcher. He's not a dynamic playmaker.
He is a dynamic playmaker. He just hasn't had an opportunity in Pittsburgh yet.
But he's just a freak body.
Because he did it at UGA, and he's a freak. Yeah. He's fast. But, okay.
The second team is Seattle, a team that utilizes pass-catching tight ends. It usually has 3 tight ends that are all being used.
And will sprinkle in touchdowns left and right.
Yeah. This is a good spot for him to come into and learn from a group of veteran, good guys that are good tight ends that he can develop in later in the season and come on, because I think he's more athletic than any of those guys there.
Well, in my opinion, any guy on this list that we're going to be going through, except Bowers, I think will have a great career in Seattle.
Yep.
Not for fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately,
until Lockett's gone. Yeah. And whatever tight end becomes the third pass catcher on that team, not going to be the case.
Yep.
You can't put any sort of guess and averages together on what you can see out of the tight end position from Seattle.
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, like you've had successes of Jimmy Graham there. You've had some guys
but you didn't have three wide receivers. You didn't have three solid wide receivers.
You're right, but it opens up some more. I think to develop him again. I don't think that any of these guys are going to be more than a bye week replacement on this list that we're going to talk about.
Besides Bowers.
Now they will have a chance to make themselves more than a bye week replacement if they get the opportunity. I mean, you look at guys last year like Tucker Kraft, later in the season, who was very fantasy relevant.
Well, Luke Musgraves, one of the guys who I thought was going to be a great tight end.
He got hurt.
He got hurt, but before that, he was in there. He was with a group of young guys that he got his opportunities. He was open a lot because he created mismatches. He's a good enough athlete. I could see that being the case for some of these guys here. Now, obviously, that it helped out that he won that tight end 1 position. But again, Sanders goes to the right team, he is the tight end 1. Yeah. Because there's plenty of tight ends out there, but what type of tight end is that offense really going to look for? With all the changes in offensive coordinators and coaching staff throughout this entire league, I wouldn't be surprised if Washington wants to get one of these guys that's a pass catcher in a high-flying Cliff Kingsbury offense.
Yeah, with Logan Thomas getting hurt all the time.
Yeah.
Why not? But again, these are going to be 3rd, 4th round guys that we're going to talk about that could end up being in a good position in some of those teams.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Theo Johnson from Penn State.
Yep.
Guy had only 34 receptions for 341 yards and 7 touchdowns. So you could see he was a red zone threat for the Nittany Lions. He's 6'6", 259. Tallest of the bunch of the group that we're talking about today. But he is explosive.
Let's talk about his combine scores.
Stats were off the chart.
And just his athletic ability, the 4.57 40, the 10.5-inch broad jump. His vertical is 39.5 inches. He has athletic ability from a tight end position, from a big body frame. Now, he is raw in terms of the pure football IQ, tight end IQ. He comes from the defensive side of the ball. He was a basketball player, which I think is really good because he is a good go up there and grab it kind of guy. He attacks the ball at the vertical position. He's a good pass catcher, but he needs to learn how to run routes better. He needs to be a more consistent blocker. And that, I think, is the crux for a lot of these guys that come in. Like, all of these guys at the tight end position are physical freaks, but there's so much more you are asked to do as a tight end in the NFL than you are to do in college. Because you're going to be lining up against Myles Garrett. Like, what do you get? Like,
you're going to have to go and chip TJ Watt.
Yeah.
And if you miss him, good luck.
Yeah. You're going to have to go up
against
against
Nick Bosa. You're going
to get a ball
that game. Yeah. No.
So, if you miss those blocks, you're not going to find yourself on the field. And it doesn't matter how good of an athlete you are. Like, you're just not going to find yourself on the field because you're going to miss blocks, and they require you to do that. It's like these pass catching running backs that we talk about. If they can't stand in there and pass block, if they don't know how to do that, they're not going to see the field.
Yeah, what good are they? Yeah.
Like, you can be athletic all you want, and you can be able to catch the ball all you want, but like, if your other responsibility is to sit there and block, and you can't do that, you won't find the field because there's a million guys after you that can do that.
Yeah. Now, to me, Theo Johnson, his draft stock rose. I'm not going to call him our number 3 on this list because 3, 4, 5 that we're talking about here can be mixed matched. And it all depends on where they go. I still think Bowers and Sanders are the clear-cut 1 and 2s on our list here. But Theo Johnson rose up the rankings in terms of pre-draft due to strictly because his combine numbers. So I don't want to be fooled by those, but athletic ability like that at the tight end position. We just talked about Njoku earlier and just the athletic ability that he had there. Gronkowski's athletic ability in here and there. Like, that can translate to the field because of the linebackers across for them in terms of pass catching and route running and who's covering them don't have the same equivalent numbers and same equivalent athletic ability. I think that benefits him, but this is a pure case of a player that needs to go somewhere and develop. After maybe 2 years, you'll start to see a true tight end out of him if he is able to develop. I like the fact that the tight end group is like a family in the NFL, and they have the tight end U. It really helps players like this who thrived in college and have this raw talent, but don't have good direction because let's be honest, like only a few programs in college football are very tight end specific and tight end taught. And it used to be Penn State, and that's fallen off a little bit. Penn State used to be a big linebacker, and that's fallen off a little bit too. But now you see the likes of your Ohio States
Iowa.
for tight ends. Iowa's the biggest one. That's Iowa's TEU to me. So
Yeah.
I think Theo Johnson's a perfect case of like if you want to get a guy that can learn behind a veteran and you want to bring some size to it. I mean, it's exactly what Pittsburgh did last year when they drafted Washington to play behind Freiermuth.
Yeah.
You had this big athletic freak that can block, that can catch, but was raw.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. There's a lot more of this tight-knit group of tight ends in the NFL that are really going to help learn, teach these younger guys that come up. But that's what I'm saying for a lot of these guys is that like it's going to take a year or two. Like these are names you should know now, and dynasty-wise, you should go and draft one of these guys in your mid rounds because in a year or two, these guys could end up in a position where they can make real impacts and be the next.
Yep.
Kels, Andrews, whatever. List your names of the next guy that they can be. But I think that when you come into the league as raw as some of these guys do, you struggle to find the field based solely on your talent. Like there's a lot more that you are asked to do.
Yeah, athleticism doesn't.
Everyone's
doesn't do
athletic.
it, yeah.
Everyone's a freak athlete in the NFL. Everyone can make spectacular catches, and everyone can do this. It doesn't matter. Can you get open? Can you block? Can you do the assignment that we require from you in this offense? Now you see different offenses get used. I know you commented on the Gronk, but yeah, Gronk was raw. But you know what he was really good at? Blocking, which is why he saw the field as a young player.
Yeah,
he was a great blocker. And Kittle, what was he really good at? Blocking, which is why he saw the field so much. So when you see the field that much, then you start getting schemed open. Then you start realizing, oh, this guy's an athletic freak too, and I can get him the ball and look what he can do after the catch.
Yep.
And both those guys are great examples of like, okay, wow, you can do this. All right, I'm going to get you the ball more. And now all of a sudden they become a top target for their quarterbacks.
One thing too, I think you got to look at teams maybe being a little gun shy on some tight ends like a Sanders or a Johnson or maybe even Stover, who we're going to talk about, because of what happened with Kyle Pitts, an athletic freak in a position that was constantly a mismatch. Did I think he was the best blocking tight end out there? No, I don't think he was. I think he was purely a great pass-catching tight end. In my opinion, you look at the size of Julio Jones and you look at the size of Kyle Pitts and you look at the athletic ability of the both of them, they should have just slimmed Kyle Pitts down and turned him into a wide receiver. But that being said, outside of that,
the problem there, and this is the problem with a lot of these guys, and what we're going to talk about with a lot of these the tight ends on this list and some of the wide receivers that we've talked about is, why Kyle Pitts wasn't successful in Atlanta? Because they didn't have a quarterback to throw him the ball.
Throw him the ball, exactly.
And you look at him, his on the field play, and like the guy gets open.
No, but he does, but he doesn't, because if you go look at his metrics on separation, they were awful last year.
Yeah. But there was also times when he was completely wide open.
Yes.
And
nobody get him the ball.
Ritter's looking the other way.
Yeah. But I just think that if you look at that and you put so much into the tight end position to get a pass catching tight end, you don't want a one trick pony, But
that's my point too, is like these guys need to go into the right scenario, and develop into a better tight end and then be used as that weapon. And again, you see the tight ends as they were used in Detroit, it didn't. All right, we got Sam Laporta. Cool. The offense is tight end friendly. Seattle or there's a reason. Every year that George Kittle misses a game, I go and pick up his backup for a week. There's a reason Kels, when he misses a game, you get their backup because they use the tight end and the offense is schemes for tight ends.
Yeah.
So when they end up in those scenarios where they have and whatever tight end, if they get a pass catching tight end that goes to Cincinnati, they're going to be good.
Well, that's what I say. I think because it's built around the position.
Yeah.
Like the tight ends that have been there, Hayden Hurst couldn't stay healthy. Irv Smith Jr. couldn't stay healthy. Yeah. But those guys had success
Green
when
Bay,
healthy.
Cincinnati, Buffalo. Yep. Those are teams that really do utilize the tight end. And yeah, you said New England.
Oh, I think New Orleans is a great program that has always utilized the tight end.
Yeah, I don't know if any of these guys are successful. It's the same reason that Kamara had an up and down season. It's like Taysom Hill's there. Until Taysom Hill's gone or playing quarterback.
I'm not saying these guys should go there. I'm just saying that's a program that even before Taysom Hill was there, they utilized that tight end position well.
And Seattle uses the tight end position well. The fact is they just use 3 of them.
Yeah.
And so there are teams where these guys go to where they can be really successful because the offense uses tight ends very, very well. Well, I think Miami's a good spot for a tight end, for one of these pass catching tight ends. They're a good spot because they have weapons on the outside. They come from that Shanahan offense, which utilizes the tight end to get open in space down the field. So you get some of these guys, you get a Sanders or you get a Johnson that ends up being on that team, and they can do real damage because they're athletic freaks and they're going to have space around them and get mismatches.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a missing cog in the wheel for the Dolphins is a tight end position because they're a 2-player team on the offense at that point. When you take the running game out of it, he goes to 1 or 2 people right now. Well, let's talk about another tight end that could find themselves in a great situation with Cade Stover at Ohio State. This was the John Mackey Award finalist with Brock Bowers. Bowers obviously won it, but he has a huge basketball background. Pass catching ability is a huge plus for this guy at Ohio State. He was a defensive player.
So I switched these.
I didn't want to stop in the middle of the talk. Yeah. But Stover was the defensive player that moved the offensive side of the ball. At 6'4", 247, he has an understanding about the defensive side of the ball, which is a plus, that IQ that you can't teach if you haven't done it. Yeah. And then on top of that, the guy, 41 receptions, 576 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He was a critical part of Ohio State's offense. And I just think, to me, here's another guy that, he could possibly be the 3rd guy on the list that may get off the board. He doesn't jump off the charts with athletic ability in terms of his metrics. It doesn't mean he doesn't jump off the charts as a playmaker at the tight end position. But I think he is well-rounded enough and raw enough. And the fact that he learned to play defense and swap to the ball and had the success he has means he is a sponge in terms of information and ability absorption to learn NFL tight end position.
This is the guy I really like is because of his intelligence, his off the field intelligence, his understanding of football and what a team wants him to do. So again, he has the chance to not only his athletic ability and not only what he can do as a pass catcher and a blocker, but what he can develop into after getting under the right system.
Yep.
And I think he's going to be a backup this year.
Yeah.
But I think he can. This is a guy in Dynasty you absolutely want to keep your eye on where he's dropping to, because if you can get him at a real good value, this guy next year can overtake whatever player he's behind.
Yep.
Other than these elite guys.
To me, Dynasty, you're right with some of these guys here. Keeper leagues wise, Bowers and Sanders are the only 2 that I'd be trying to take a chance on in a keeper league in terms of keepability, because you just don't know on the other ones. But I will tell you what, if the Chargers draft a tight end this year, I would take a chance on one of them. It's a numbers game. Like, ball has to go to somebody.
Yeah, and they have a quarterback that throws the ball,
and he throws the ball well. And even one of these young guys who's raw, maybe they're not going to get 10 targets a game, but they get 6 targets a game. They catch 4 balls and a touchdown on a consistent basis. It's an easy stat for somebody like Cade Stover to get in a situation with that size and his ability and his basketball background in the red zone for somebody like Herbert. I love it. So I'm putting a little bit of grain of salt, with a grain of salt in terms of these tight ends. Definitely where they're going is important, and we'll talk a little bit more about that after the draft. But I think his abilities, his size, and his knowledge, and like you said, his ability to learn and his IQ is going to get him into a position, and a team's going to take a chance on him that may need a tight end.
Well, I think a good spot for him would be Dallas, where he can learn. He doesn't have to step up immediately. Schoonmaker's there, and he can play behind Schoonmaker, but he can overtake that if he plays well. But next year, he can really step up as being a tight end 1 in that offense.
Well, you've just seen the wheel of tight ends go through that. Dalton Schultz and everybody. It's just easy for them to learn behind them. But to me, they're all the same type of tight end.
Right.
This would be a different tight end for them.
Yeah. I think that would be a good fit for him because he is so raw and they can kind of mold him. And again, he has the chance to learn behind someone. I think that's going to be really important for him, is to be able to learn behind guys. Kansas City is another one where I think he'd be a really good fit. You learn behind the best tight end in the game for the last 10 years. and you really start to develop your game a little bit more. You don't have these bad habits. He needs to be a better blocker. He needs to get better at that. He
all of them on this list, I think, do. I think it's the biggest thing.
And that's kind of my knock on a lot of these guys and a lot of this tight end class is like none of them are coming out, and the top offensive guys are not very good blockers. And maybe we're starting to see that kind of scheme a little bit more for tight ends that are coming out of college. It's like we're so focused on the pass catching ability, but people forget like a lot of these good pass catchers that come out, like even Laporta. Laporta was a good blocker.
Well, take anybody from Iowa aside because they literally train them on that differently than other teams do.
Yeah, but that there's a reason why all of them come in and are good tight ends in the NFL because they're going to see the field more because they can do everything.
Yeah,
and like all these tight ends now can catch. All these like this isn't 5-6 years ago. And we talked about it last year in our tight ends episode. Is the tight end position is no longer this feast or famine. There's a lot more depth at the tight end position now. And there's a lot more teams that utilize the tight end as in this pass catching role, especially down at the red zone.
And we'll break down the tight end position. Like we break down all the positions at the end in terms of when we go over our kind of draft prep episodes leading up closer to the
draft prep.
Yeah. Leading up closer to the fantasy football draft weekends. Let's talk about this last guy here and let's wrap this tight end group up because it's so small and we've been talking for a little while, I'm sure.
Before we do that, don't forget, like and subscribe.
If you've been with us this long, thank you. Appreciate it. Leave your comments on your thoughts on these guys. But Chris, I'll let you take the reins on this last guy because I know he's your favorite one on this list. And it just happens to be on a team that you used to be a huge fan of before you went to a school that actually had a football team.
That's true.
But that's Jaheim Bell out of Florida State.
Yeah, I mean, he's undersized. I get it. I get he's a smaller tight end. He's only 6'3", 239. But in terms of like pass catching ability and the spectacular catch, he's not really great at one thing. And this is where I think a lot of these guys are raw, and he's really raw. But what he does have is the playmaking ability.
Yeah.
They like to get him the ball into space. He is great with the ball in space. So even he does a lot of what like Brock Bowers was doing. Screen catches, the swing passes, the short intermediate stuff. He's physical when he has the ball in his hands and as a runner. And I really like that ability for him to get onto a team where he might be undersized and he might be underutilized, but he might be a package player. Like ideally, this year, I don't see him coming into being a starter anywhere, but this is a guy that is raw enough and has the talent enough and the big playability to where he can really step up into a role in certain packages, and we can start seeing him used. He kind of reminds me of like almost how the Jaguars, the first year Evan Engram was there, the way the Jaguars used him.
Yeah, use him all over the field. He was fantastic with the ball after the catch just because they got him ball in space. Biggest difference between him and Bowers in terms of after the catch is Bowers with his tree trunks of a legs, like he was very difficult to tackle.
Right.
And I think that's the benefit. That's why the yards after the catch for Bowers were so good. His yards after the catch here is just his ability to make people miss and his ability to see the field once he has the ball in his hands.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest thing we have for he's 6'3", 239, so he's quote unquote undersized. He stood next to us, he'd be towering over us.
Of course.
But he's undersized. But he still went for 503 yards on 39 receptions. So big numbers on little usage. And he only had 2 touchdowns. I agree with you. I think this is a guy that can be schemed into packages.
Right.
We've seen tight ends like that before in the past in other places. We've seen 2 tight end sets in different places. If there's an offense that wants to use a 2 tight end set, here's a guy that gives you athletic ability next to maybe a more traditional tight end that can give you something. We thought it was going to be bigger like that in New England, like it was back in the Hernandez and the Gronk days. But I think this is a guy who can definitely be the yin to a yang on a 2 tight end set and find themselves open.
This is a guy where I can see him going to Miami.
Yeah.
And do really, really well there.
Yeah.
Because they're already spread out. They're already trying to find these sometimes undersized guys that can just get into space and get the ball to and then move. And this is what he's really good at, is when he gets the ball in his hands, he thrives. And this is an ability where, you have Tyreek on one side and Tyreek and Waddle, and you can flank this guy out on the other side, or even have him in kind of like the offset tight end position. and just swing him out the other way on a short pass.
Run him out to the flat.
Yeah, and get this guy some space. He's going to thrive. He's going to fall forward for a first down. He's undersized, but he's still big enough to be able to fight off linebackers and definitely beat corners and safeties. So yeah, this is a guy, I think, again, if he ends up in a good spot, he can really do some damage even this year, and then where they scheme him open.
Yeah.
And they're Miami is a team that looks for that big playability. Cincinnati is even another good spot for him. I know we mentioned kind of the same teams here.
Well, we're talking about teams that have
there's a reason why we're
bigger
mentioning
need
them.
in those positions.
Not just a need, but the usage from that position is really good there. I mean, we've seen if Miami only had a semi-athletic. I mean, they had Smythe last year. Like, they had nobody. So they get a freak athlete or a pass catcher there. They can really utilize his ability, and he's going to step up because that offense is good enough and high potent enough.
Yeah, I mean, I like to see him in Kansas City.
Yeah,
I mean, this is a perfect person to put on the same time on the field, the same time as Travis Kelce.
Yeah.
Kelce garners the attention. This guy slips out underneath him, ball in open space. We've seen it happen with the other tight ends on this team that are on short-term contracts.
Yeah.
Right now, you get a rookie guy in there too. And let's be honest, we have no idea what's going to happen with Rashee Rice. And so because of that, you're going to need as many pass catchers on this offense.
Love my Marquise Brown shares.
Yeah, love the Marquise. Yeah.
Love
so, well, that's the end of our tight end episode here. Again, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sticking through to the end of this with us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that notification button so you get all the drops that we're throwing out for these coming weeks. And next week, we will be doing our live reaction to the NFL draft. We're going to definitely do the top 10 picks. We may stick it through to the entire 32.
We'll see.
But definitely top 10 picks live reaction, and then we'll have a full recording.
I don't know if we'll have time.
We'll see.
Yeah.
So tune in next week for our live NFL draft reaction. Put a comment down below if you like any of these guys and where you think they're going to go.
Or even guys that aren't on this list. Drop them down below if you really like them. Maybe we'll do a player profile on those guys.
Yep. Appreciate it. And as always, thanks for tuning in.